I really envy you, because you've just stumbled upon another insanely thrilling feel-good drama. If you finish watching it and feel bored, come back and slap me in the face directly. Today's Korean drama truly stands out from the rest, with many people saying it's even better than The Glory and Dear Ex, and some viewers claiming that even a 7 rating still feels far too low, because everyone sees the most realistic side of reality in the show, and the endless tragic twists and raw storytelling are only the tip of the iceberg. To be honest, when I first read those comments, I was a bit skeptical. Can a drama really be that good? But after finishing the entire series, oh my god, what they said was still way too understated. The story mainly follows Emomi, a girl who has dreamed of becoming a star since childhood, but constantly suffers discrimination because of her looks. In order to chase her dream, she puts on a golden mask and starts live streaming sensual dance performances. But along that path, she tragically steps into a violent spiral and sinks deeper and deeper. The woman's name is Emomi, and ever since she was 5 years old, she truly enjoyed being on stage. At first, she had no idea how harsh her starting point was, but as time moved into 1993, Emomi's looks and figure gradually developed, yet her love for dancing never faded. From her mother's disapproving gaze, it was clear that she was unwilling to let her daughter pursue a life on stage.
네 그 얼굴로 가수를 한다고? 깨라.
Even so, Emomi never felt discouraged by her appearance at that time, believing that people change as they grow up, and that one day she would become beautiful, in the blink of an eye. 5 more years passed, and she earned a chance to perform at her middle school graduation show. But not only did life fail to improve, it actually became worse.
와, 못생겼다!
Her mother's mockery and her classmates' insults slowly crushed Emomi's confidence. The stage she once loved turned into a source of fear, and her passionate life became painfully ordinary. But although her looks were average, everything else about her was top tier. And if she could hide her insecure face behind a mask, maybe she could return to the stage once again. So she launched her very first online live stream. And wow, once she tried it, she was completely shocked. Gifts flooded in non-stop, and she received endless compliments from viewers. Through live streaming, Emomi rediscovered the version of herself that once loved the stage. But the moment the stream ended, her life snapped right back to reality. Emomi worked a regular 9-to-5 job, and perhaps because of her looks, she ended up becoming the target of office gossip. Since a female coworker was quite attractive with a great figure, Emomi grew jealous and casually chatted with others, insisting the woman must have altered her appearance and that nothing about her was natural. But one day, she suddenly realized that appearances didn't matter at all in front of their department manager.
아, 그리고 아름 씨? 다음부터 이런 거 안 해도 돼요. 회사에 커피 타러 온 거 아니잖아요.
That behavior made Emomi fall deeply in love with him, believing he was different from other men and must be a genuinely upright person. From then on, she watched him every day, her eyes never leaving his face, and even when she was scolded by him at work, she felt oddly happy about it. At a colleague gathering one day, they started talking about a recently popular masked live streamer, and what she heard made Emomi spit out her drink in shock. Everyone thought she had simply choked, not knowing that the viral streamer they were discussing was actually Emomi herself. Since the food was no longer enjoyable, the manager suggested a second round, but said he needed to go home to be with his wife first. The other male coworkers agreed immediately, because they didn't care whether the manager came or not. As long as the beautiful Lee A-Reum stayed, that was all that mattered. Seeing the manager about to call a taxi and leave, Emomi sensed an opportunity to be alone with him and quickly stepped forward to ask if he could give her a ride. At that moment, the manager's wife called, seemingly checking in on him, and asked who he was with.
혼자 가고 있는데?
Hearing this, Emomi secretly felt pleased, replaying his words in her mind, unable to understand why he would lie about her when she was clearly right there beside him. Could it be that while she was secretly in love with him, he also felt the same way about her? That night during her live stream, Emomi shared the incident with her followers. Some viewers thought she was overthinking things, but most agreed with Emomi, saying the manager must like her. Otherwise, why wouldn't he tell his wife the truth? Clearly leaving room for something more. This gave Emomi a huge boost of confidence. The next day, She deliberately worked overtime late into the night, hoping to run into the manager after work and confess her feelings in a romantic moment. Unfortunately, the manager had already gone home early, leaving only Emomi and Liam in the office. Already irritated by her looks, Emomi decisively left the company, leaving Liam alone behind. But in her rush downstairs, Emomi realized she had left her access card inside and had no choice but to return. Unexpectedly, at the elevator, she ran into the man she loved, making Emomi so happy that it felt like fate was forcing them together. She quickly took the elevator back up and excitedly headed toward the manager's office, only to see him and Liam kissing inside. At that moment, everyone turned out to be a liar, and even Emomi had deceived herself. She broke down crying loudly on the street, happiness disappearing just like her old stage dream, gone in an instant. After returning home, Emomi downed several bottles of liquor in one go to numb her sadness, fueled by alcohol. She lost control and opened a live stream while barely conscious, imagining herself on a massive stage under countless eyes. With her skirts swirling in the air, Emomi began performing an inappropriate dance. The viewers exploded, and her live stream channel was permanently shut down for violations. When Emomi woke up the next day, she found herself completely undressed. Only then did she realize how badly she had messed up, and she slapped herself repeatedly in regret. See, what I said was absolutely right. Happiness and the stage can disappear in an instant. With her channel banned, Emomi wandered the streets in a depressed haze. Perhaps by sheer coincidence, she ran into the drunk manager on the street, completely unconscious.
팀장님!
뭐야? 전부터가 말을 하네.
Because Emomi was tall and slender, the manager mistook her for a pole and, right in the middle of the busy street, began relieving himself. Emomi rushed to stop him, while passers-by stared at them as if they were strange people. Left with no choice, Emomi had to take the manager away from the scene first. She had no idea where the manager lived, so she could only ask the driver to keep driving around with the two of them, circling again and again. In the end, the driver didn't want to earn money this way anymore, so he simply dropped them off on the street. At that moment, a light rain began to fall, and there happened to be a motel right nearby. Worried that the manager might catch a chill with his clothes soaked, she thoughtfully rented a room and let him sleep there to sober up. Then, just as Emomi took off the manager's coat and prepared to leave, he mistook her for Liam, pulled her into his arms, and things unfolded exactly as Emomi had hoped. When the manager sobered up the next day and opened his eyes, the moment he saw Emomi's face, he was completely stunned, quietly packed his things, didn't even bother getting dressed properly, and hurriedly fled the room. In fact, Emomi hadn't fallen asleep at all, and even with such an ending, she still felt secretly happy inside. Emomi rushed to work the next day, only to find that the manager hadn't shown up at all. Her emotions instantly became complicated. Could it be that the manager quit because of her? Just then, a stranger sent Emomi an email, and out of curiosity, she opened it, only to be shocked by what she saw. It was actually photos of her dancing from last night. Her scream drew the attention of her coworkers. So afraid of being discovered, she hurried to the restroom to check again, where 6 clear words were written. "I know who you are." She was clearly wearing a mask. So how could this person have identified her so precisely? Could this mysterious person be someone she knew? As these thoughts piled up, she gradually began to break down. With no other choice, Emomi had to temporarily leave the company. She was already unhappy, but when she saw the manager's message, it instantly pushed her emotions to the edge. She lay face down on the bed and cried in anger. Life wasn't going well. Love wasn't going well. Her looks were nothing special, and even her fans had played such a cruel joke on her. In order to find out who this mysterious person was, Emomi opened the page showing her band account, only to unexpectedly discover that there was still a mysterious user quietly supporting the live stream. His name was Reborn1bin. Out of curiosity, Emomi sent him a chat request. To her surprise, he replied instantly and was extremely proactive. Finally finding someone who could comfort her, Emomi began chatting with him and told him all the troubles she had been dealing with lately.
그러니까 누나, 그놈은 잊어버려요.
This man was named Juan, and because he liked being alone, The masked girl's livestream had become his daily source of comfort. He shared one major flaw with Emomi: deep insecurity. Having been overweight since childhood, he was constantly discriminated against and bullied by other kids, which left him unable to ever hold his head high. Now that he was older and still couldn't find a girlfriend, he bought a doll to keep him company, and the only people he talked to each day were his mother and the masked girl in Emomi's livestream. Because he was known for being extremely withdrawn, he never ate with coworkers and was even afraid of making eye contact with women. Under this suffocating environment, Juan began paying attention to women's hands, and among them, Emomi's hands stood out the most, with 2 moles in the exact same position. At first, Juan didn't think much of it, until one day while watching the masked girl's livestream, he accidentally noticed that she also had 2 moles on her hand, exactly the same as Emomi's. From that day on, Juan fell deeply in love with Emomi, his gaze seeming permanently fixed on her. Every time Emomi went live, he would be there from the very first moment, defending her against negative comments and often saying things that made her happy for the entire day. And during that gathering, when Emomi accidentally spit out her drink after coworkers mentioned the masked girl, it splashed all over Juan. Yet instead of getting angry, he felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. When he learned from the live stream that Emomi had fallen for the manager, Juan's heart shattered in an instant. So the next evening after work, Juan deliberately waited downstairs, planning to confess his feelings to Emomi. Just then, a coworker walked over, and while the two were chatting, they failed to notice Emomi passing by nearby. As a result, he waited for a full hour, and even after everyone else had left, he was still foolishly standing there. While he was lost in thought, Juan suddenly saw the manager rushing back toward the company, and believing the manager was going to look for Emomi, he hurriedly followed him to find out the truth. What he ended up seeing was the manager with Liam, which made Juan burst into uncontrollable laughter. He thought this meant he now had a real chance to win Emomi over. But that very night, while watching the masked girl's live stream, Emomi danced out of sadness in an inappropriate way. Before he could even confront the manager, the very next day he saw Emomi helping a drunk manager into a taxi. He panicked and followed them, watching helplessly as they walked into a hotel and never came back out. That night, heavy rain poured down, and the large raindrops shattered on the ground like his broken heart. Impossible to piece back together. Soaked to the bone, Juan returned home like an empty shell. So a mysterious email appeared, and it was this very message that prompted the masked girl to send him a chat request and ask to meet in person. Unexpectedly, Juan hesitated for only a few seconds before the masked girl turned around, accepted another fan instead, and immediately closed the chat room. That night, Emomi showed up at the agreed meeting place fully covered, her face tightly concealed. The other party was a young man, and she repeatedly avoided his gaze, afraid he might see her unattractive face. The young man disliked the sense of mystery, since they were already meeting offline, so he encouraged Emomi to remove her disguise and be her true self. Emomi initially wanted to refuse, but the young man suddenly raised his voice in the restaurant, drawing the attention of people nearby. Under pressure, Emomi quickly agreed and was forced to remove her glasses and mask.
너 얼굴 왜 숨겼어? 이뻐. 한국말. Attractive.
The young man's compliments greatly boosted Emomi's confidence, and she gradually began to relax. When she learned that he had graduated from a university in the United States, her impression of him improved even more. He then said that Emomi's facial features were very popular in the US, especially her high cheekbones. Cheekbones were the part Emomi disliked most, and she had thought many times about altering them. But hearing his praise made her feel increasingly confident about her appearance. She went to the restroom and stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. Meanwhile, the young man stood outside holding his phone, doing something unknown. The moment Emomi returned, he guiltily flipped his phone face down onto the table. At the same time, Juan searched for the masked girl's social account, and in the very first comment, he discovered the young man who was meeting Emomi offline. so he clicked it out of curiosity. Realizing the young man's bad intentions, Juan immediately called Emomi, but by then she was already fully engaged in conversation and couldn't hear the phone ringing. When Emomi kept refusing to answer, Juan took a taxi and rushed to the restaurant where they had been eating. By that time, the two had already left, and after constant persuasion from the young man, they stopped in front of a hotel.
여긴 좀...
딴 데 진짜 시끄럽잖아. Come on, let's go.
The young man was clearly exaggerating his background, as his claim of graduating from an American university was pure bluff, and he even wanted to book a short stay room at night, which made no sense. When he learned that a night at the hotel cost 60,000 won, he hesitated. Seeing Emomi waiting at the entrance, out of pride, he reluctantly took out his wallet, told Emomi to go upstairs and rest first, and said he would go buy some drinks at a convenience store. Coincidentally, Juan had already arrived near the restaurant and brushed past the young man, but since neither of them knew what the other looked like, they missed each other just like that. Inside the hotel room, Emomi was extremely cautious, and when she accidentally sat on the bed, the softness startled her. Just as she was at a loss, her phone rang, and she saw that Juan had called her 8 times. Since Juan had always been overly devoted and they barely had any real connection, Emomi didn't take it seriously. At that moment, the young man returned with the drinks.
여기서 마시는 건 좀 아닌 것 같아.
왜 그래 갑자기? 응? 아까는 괜찮다 그랬잖아.
나 괜찮다고 한 적...
Unexpectedly, he suddenly grew impatient and stopped pretending, dragging Emomi and pushing her onto the bed. But he wasn't very tall, and there was no way he could overpower Emomi.
나 못생긴 게 좋다 들리네.
One of his remarks instantly ignited Emomi's anger, making her furious. Unaware of how serious the situation had become, the young man escalated things further, mocking her for dancing during live streams and accusing her of acting reserved now. Since he showed no basic respect, Emomi finally snapped, swinging her bag and knocking him onto the bed. The young man stared in disbelief, shocked that she dared to fight back. Feeling humiliated, he pushed Emomi back onto the bed again, but he wasn't even as tall as Emomi's legs, and there was no way he could match her strength. After one kick, he instantly lost all his power. The two struggled fiercely on the waterbed, turning what should have been a normal date into something like a chaotic fight scene. Neither of them was willing to back down, especially the young man, who felt deeply humiliated at being overpowered, and he charged at Emomi in anger. In a moment of carelessness, his head slammed into the sink behind him, and he collapsed onto the floor without moving. When Emomi finally came to her senses, she realized she had caused a huge disaster. The young man's head was bleeding all over the floor, and at that moment she had no idea whether he was alive or dead. Having never experienced anything like this before, Emomi was so terrified that her whole body trembled, and she hurriedly pulled out her phone to call for help. Just as Emomi was wondering how he could possibly know, Juan suddenly called again, and with nowhere else to turn, she told him everything that had just happened. Soon after, Juan arrived at the room, and when he saw the motionless body on the floor, he couldn't believe that the Emomi he loved had taken a life.
아니 이 새끼가 저를 막 덮치려고 달려들어가지고 나는 그냥 싫다고 했는데 근데 계속 그래서.
This was a living human being, and for anyone, it was enough to scare them half to death. Emomi cried and wanted to call for help, but before she could even unlock her phone, Juan snatched it away.
이대로 좀 가면 모미 씨 감옥 갈 수 있어요.
저 정당방위로 얘기하면
모미 씨가 이 새끼랑 모텔에 온 건 사실이잖아요. 우발적 살인 뭐 그런 걸로 처리돼도 최소 몇 년은 살다 나올 수 있어요.
Hearing this, Emomi broke down in tears, never imagining that a single date would turn her into someone who had ended another person's life. Juan couldn't bear the thought of Emomi going to prison, so after thinking it over again and again, he told her to go home first and said he would handle everything that followed. But Emomi's conscience wouldn't allow her to leave, and no matter what, she refused, until Juan completely lost control and forced Emomi back home. That night, Ju Onam prepared a pile of tools, put on a raincoat, picked up a knife, and walked into the bathroom, planning to break the young man's body apart and secretly hide it in a remote area. Since it was his first time doing something like this, Ju Onam's hands trembled uncontrollably from nervousness. However, before he could even remove the clothes, the young man lying on the floor suddenly woke up. Ju Onam was so frightened that he thought he was seeing a ghost, and he drove the blade straight into the young man's chest. Seeing that the young man was still moving, Ju Onam pulled the blade out and stabbed him again. Blood splattered everywhere, and Ju Onam gradually lost control, perhaps recalling the things the young man had said to Emomi before. As fear turned into hatred, he struck again and again, until the chest was left unrecognizable. The scene was so horrifying that even Ju Onam became physically sick. Back at home, Emomi lay in the bathtub, as if sensing what was happening. She panicked and quickly climbed out of the water. She then looked at herself in the mirror, only to see her face slowly melting away, her skin turning into something like mud, followed by her entire body. Thankfully, it was only a dream. In order to escape this shadow, Emomi made a major decision. The next day, Ju Onam went to work with a heavy heart, thinking that once everything was handled, Emomi would no longer be afraid. But at his workplace, he couldn't see Emomi anywhere. Only then did he learn from coworkers that Emomi had called in and quit her job. The suddenness of it left even her close friend completely confused, and when she tried to call her to ask what happened, her phone was already turned off. After several days passed, Ju Onam sensed that something was wrong, so he searched online for recent missing person cases, but the latest ones were all from months ago. So why did Emomi suddenly stop going to work? Was it because she didn't know how to face Ju Onam? In order to break this awkward situation, Ju Onam used the excuse of delivering something to obtain Emomi's home address from Human Resources, and that very night, he showed up at her door. He rang the doorbell several times, but there was no response inside, and her phone was still turned off. With no right to force his way in, Ju Onam could only return home in disappointment. Emomi's unexplained disappearance left him depressed every day, so distressed that he couldn't even eat, and he angrily threw his food against the wall. And then, at that very moment, when he saw Emomi going live from her home, Ju Onam was furious. He had taken responsibility for everything, yet not only did he receive no gratitude, she was even avoiding him. Wanting to understand why, he rushed straight to Emomi's home, pounding on the door and demanding that she come out and see him immediately. After nearly 10 minutes of knocking, Emomi finally opened the door. Seeing piles of packed luggage inside, Ju Onam realized that she was preparing to move away.
아무 일도 없었던 것처럼 다시 다닐 순 없잖아요.
모미 씨, 그날 일은 잊어야 해요. 그냥 없었던 일이라고 생각해요. 알잖아요. 그놈은 죽어도 싼 놈이었어요. 그냥 벌레 같은 놈이었다고요.
맞지? 전생의 원빈.
Emomi had only told one fan, Reborn One Bin, about meeting someone offline, and combined with everything that had happened over the past few days, she became convinced that Ju Onam had been watching her all along, so she asked him why he did this. Ju Onam replied with just one word, love. Hearing this, Emomi bent over laughing uncontrollably. After what happened with the manager and the young man, she no longer believed in romantic love, and assumed that Ju Onam's approach toward her had the same intentions as the young man before.
이제 예전의 김모미는 죽었어요. 리셋하는 거죠.
나도 지워지는 건가?
진짜 똑같으면서.
Just as Emomi was about to leave, Ju Onam suddenly lost control and restrained her, thinking about everything he had done for her, only to be mocked and compared to that young man. Ju Onam couldn't accept it. Strangely enough, Emomi didn't resist at all, and instead allowed him to do whatever he wanted. But when he got close to her, through the mask, he realized that Emomi seemed to have changed. The moment the mask was removed, he discovered that during the days Emomi had disappeared, she had undergone cosmetic changes. Before Ju Onam could even react, Emomi grabbed a screwdriver and drove it forcefully into his neck. Just like what had happened to the young man before, she struck his chest again and again. until Juan completely stopped breathing. As the camera shifts to the bloodstained mask, the real game is only just beginning. Alright, that's the end of today's story, and I look forward to our next meeting.